POV, you chose wealth over looking rich status. You're standing in a parking lot, keys in your hand, and for exactly 3 seconds, you feel like you've made it. The car is new, the lease payment is due on the 1st. The interior still smells like plastic and ambition. Somebody at work noticed, somebody at the gym asked about it, and for those 3 seconds, that mattered more than it should have. This is the story of what happens after those 3 seconds end, because they always end. You know this feeling, the new watch, the upgraded phone the day it launches, the dinner reservation you post before you even taste the food. None of these things are wrong on their own, but somewhere along the way, a question started living quietly in the back of your mind and you've been avoiding it. Are you building wealth, or are you performing it? There's a difference between wanting a good life and wanting people to believe you already have one. And the first is a goal, the second is a costume. And costumes are expensive to maintain because the moment you stop wearing them, you're afraid of who might be standing underneath. You've seen the version of success that gets photographed, the car in the driveway, the vacation feed, the watch in the mirror selfie. What you don't see is the account balance behind it, the payment plan behind it, the version of that person lying awake doing math they don't want to do. This isn't a story about them, it's a story about a decision. One you may have already started making without fully realizing it. A decision between two very different futures. One that looks impressive from the outside and one that actually holds weight when nobody's watching. And it starts with a moment most people miss completely. The moment you realize that looking rich and being rich are not just different. They are, in many cases, opposites. Trap. Here's how the trap works. You get a raise, a real one. Money you didn't have last year. And almost immediately your standard of living rises to meet it. Sometimes even before the money hits your account. New apartment, nicer car, a few more takeout orders a week that don't feel like decisions because they're small. This has a name, lifestyle inflation, and it is patient. It doesn't ask you for everything at once. It asks for a little more every time you have a little more to give. The dangerous part isn't the spending itself, it's that lifestyle inflation is invisible in real time. You don't feel your expenses rising, you feel your income rising, and you assume that means you're winning. Meanwhile, somewhere in your city, there's a version of you with a smaller car, a smaller apartment, and a much larger number sitting quietly in an account nobody else will ever see. Nobody applauds an unseen number, but it's the only number that actually protects you. This is where financing enters the picture. Financing doesn't just let you buy things. It lets you buy the appearance of an income you don't have. 0% for 18 months. Buy now, pay later. A monthly payment small enough to feel harmless, attached to a total cost large enough to change your future. The car in that parking lot might be owned by a bank. The watch might be one missed payment from a collections call. The vacation might already be a balance carried on a card, quietly gathering interest while the photos gather likes. None of this makes anyone a bad person. It makes them human. In a culture engineered to reward visible spending and punish invisible saving, social comparison plays its part too. You're not just spending against your own goals, you're spending against a mental scoreboard built from other people's highlight reels. The problem is, you're comparing your real financial life to their edited one, and edited lives always win. So ask yourself honestly, not with guilt, just with clarity. How much of what you've bought in the last year was chosen because you wanted it, and how much was chosen because you wanted to be seen with it? That question is uncomfortable. It's supposed to be, because looking rich can, quietly and steadily, become one of the most expensive habits a person can develop. Awakening. Something changes when you stop needing an audience. It doesn't happen in a single dramatic moment, no matter how satisfying that would be to film. It happens in a hallway, a parking lot, a quiet Tuesday when you almost buy something you don't need, and for the first time you pause. You start asking a different set of questions. Not, will this impress someone, but will this make me wealthier? Not, how will this look, but will this matter in 5 years? These questions feel small. They are not. They are the foundation of every meaningful financial decision that follows. At first, this shift feels like loss. You notice what you're not buying more than you notice what you're keeping. The new phone stays in the box a year longer. The car stays another 2 years past when you'd normally trade it in. There's a strange kind of grief in choosing to be invisible in a world built for visibility. But underneath that grief, something else is forming, a number, growing slower than any influencer's follower count, but growing in a direction that actually belongs to you. This awakening isn't loud. Nobody throws you a parade for opening a savings account. There's no cinematic music playing when you decline an upgrade you can technically afford. The transformation is quiet, gradual, and almost entirely internal, which is exactly why so few people ever finish it. It's hard to stay committed to a change nobody else can see. But you keep going, not because it feels good yet, because it feels true. Sacrifice. Here's what choosing wealth actually costs you. Not money, the appearance of having more of it. You say no to the upgrade. Not because you couldn't afford it, but because you're starting to understand what afford actually means. You keep the car another year, you cook more than you order, you stop replacing things that still work simply because something newer exists and people notice. Not the savings, the absence. A friend asks why you didn't get the new place. A coworker jokes about your vintage phone. Someone at a gathering makes an offhand comment about how you used to be more fun. None of it is meant to wound you, but it lands anyway because you're human, and humans are wired to want approval from the people around them. This is the part nobody shows in the highlight reel, the discomfort of looking less successful than you did a year ago, while quietly becoming more secure than you've ever been. And you may have to let people believe you're doing worse before the numbers prove you're doing better. That's a strange trade to make. It asks you to accept a temporary loss in perception for a lasting gain in position. Most people can't make that trade, not because they lack discipline, but because they've never been shown that the trade exists. You start to notice the friends who only show up when you're spending, and the ones who stay when you're not. You start to notice how much of your social life was quietly built around consumption, dinners, drinks, trips, and how strange it feels to opt out of even a small piece of it. This is the sacrifice, not deprivation, redirection. You're not giving things up. You're choosing deliberately what they're worth to you, and that wasn't the most uncomfortable part. Money math. Now let's make this real, not with fear, with numbers. Say, hypothetically, someone spends an extra $700 a month maintaining a certain lifestyle, a nicer car payment, more takeout, subscriptions they forgot they had, small upgrades that never feel large individually. That's $8,400 a year, gone, not stolen, spent willingly on things that mostly don't exist anymore by the time the next credit card statement arrives. Now imagine, purely as an illustration, that same $8,400 was invested instead, growing at a hypothetical average rate over time. This is not a guarantee. Markets rise and fall, and past patterns never promise future results. But for the sake of understanding opportunity cost, imagine that money compounding year after year, joined by another $8,400 the next year and the next. The spending feels good today. The investing feels like nothing today. That's the entire trap in one sentence. Spending rewards you immediately, and saving rewards you so slowly you can barely feel it happening. This is the concept of opportunity cost, and it's brutally simple once you see it. Every dollar spent on looking successful today is a dollar that can never work for you tomorrow. It's not gone because you spent it. It's gone because of what it could have become and never will. This isn't about becoming someone who never enjoys their money. It's about becoming someone who understands with total clarity what every dollar is actually being traded for, not just now, in 10 years, in 20. The uncomfortable truth is this: nobody gets a bill for the wealth they didn't build. It simply never arrives, which is exactly why it's so easy to ignore. Investing. So where does the redirected money actually go? It starts with a cushion, enough set aside to cover a genuine emergency without reaching for a credit card. This isn't glamorous, it won't get photographed, but it's the difference between a bad week and a financial crisis. Next comes high-interest debt, if any exists. Paying it down isn't just a math problem, it's removing a leak that quietly drains money every single month, regardless of how well everything else is going. Then comes consistency. Not a single brilliant investment, not a lucky pick, not a hot tip from someone at a party, just showing up month after month, putting money toward long-term ownership rather than short-term appearance. For many people, this takes the shape of broad market index funds, a way to hold a small piece of a wide range of companies rather than betting everything on one. It's not a promise of profit. It's a philosophy of participation over prediction. Retirement accounts often serve as one vehicle for this kind of long-term investing, offering structure and, in some cases, tax advantages worth understanding on your own terms, with your own numbers, ideally alongside a professional who knows your full situation. None of this is a guarantee. Markets fall as well as rise. There is no version of this story where risk disappears, but there is a version where, instead of consuming value, you begin owning it, where your money stops disappearing into things that lose value the moment you drive them off the lot and starts attaching itself to things that, historically, have tended to grow over long periods of time. This is the quiet shift from consumer to owner, from spending on the appearance of success to holding a piece of the actual economy that produces it. And this is where the story stops being about restraint and starts being about direction. Psychology, let's go deeper, because none of this is really about money. It's about ego. Spending to look successful is rarely about the object itself. It's about being seen, validated, placed, even briefly, above the fear of being judged as ordinary. There's a quiet terror in a lot of people, the fear that if they don't show evidence of success, no one will believe it exists. This is where delayed gratification becomes almost unnatural. Every instinct says take the reward now, be seen now, feel good now. Choosing the cheaper option produces no applause. No one hands you a trophy for the $400 you didn't spend. The reward is invisible, distant, and entirely your own to believe in. This is the psychological cliff most people turn back from. Not because they lack intelligence, because human beings are wired for immediate social feedback, and building real wealth offers almost none of it. But something shifts when you stop needing the audience. It's the difference between look at me and I know what I am building. One depends entirely on other people's attention. The other depends on nothing but your own quiet certainty. Quiet confidence doesn't perform. It doesn't need to. The person who knows their numbers, who understands their trajectory, who has stopped outsourcing their self-worth to strangers' opinions, that person doesn't need the car to say anything on their behalf. This isn't about rejecting luxury. Enjoying nice things is not the problem. Needing nice things to feel like enough, that's the problem. There's a real difference between a person who buys something beautiful because they love it and a person who buys it because they're terrified of what people will think if they don't. One is enjoyment, the other is armor. And armor is heavy to carry for an entire lifetime. Generational wealth. Now widen the lens, because this was never just about you. Every financial decision you make sends a signal to the people watching you most closely. And children watch far more than they listen. They don't remember the lecture about money. They remember whether you panicked during a hard month or handled it with calm. They remember whether no, not right now was said with resentment or with confidence. Financial education rarely comes from a classroom. It comes from example. A child who watches a parent save consistently, avoid unnecessary debt, and make deliberate choices is absorbing a framework that no amount of spending could ever hand down instead. This is where wealth stops being a number and starts becoming a foundation. An emergency reserve isn't just protection for you. It's stability for everyone who depends on you. Long-term investing isn't just a personal goal. It's the beginning of options that may extend beyond your own lifetime, even if the exact outcome can never be promised or guaranteed. Teaching a child to wait, to save, to think in years instead of days, that is a form of inheritance no market downturn can erase. It doesn't guarantee their success. Nothing does. But it hands them a way of thinking that most people are never given at all. This is the version of wealth that outlives a bank balance. Not a windfall, a foundation, something the next generation can build on rather than something they simply spend and lose, the way a lifestyle without structure so often is. You started this trying to look like you'd made it. You may end it building something that actually lasts long after you're gone. Freedom, Nobody noticed the money you didn't spend. No one applauded the car you kept. No one congratulated you for the vacation you skipped, the subscription you cancelled, the upgrade you quietly declined. There was no moment of recognition, just the slow, unglamorous accumulation of decisions that no one was watching. And that's exactly the point, because while the appearance of success needs an audience to mean anything, real financial security doesn't need anyone to witness it at all. It just needs to exist quietly, reliably, waiting for the day you actually need it. This is what discipline buys in the end. Not applause, options. The ability to leave a job that no longer fits without panic. The ability to handle an emergency without a spiral. The ability to say yes to what matters and no to what doesn't, because your decisions are no longer being made by fear or by other people's opinions. That's what freedom actually looks like. Not a bigger house, not a louder car. Time, flexibility, the quiet, steady confidence of knowing you're not one bad month away from losing everything you've built. You thought you were giving up the appearance of success. What you were actually doing, the entire time, was building the thing everyone else was only pretending to have. So here's the question this story leaves you with. Not as a challenge, but as a decision only you can make. If you had to choose today, right now, between looking wealthy and becoming wealthy, which one would you actually choose? If your answer is wealth, say it. Write it below. I choose wealth, not because anyone's watching, because for the first time, you finally are.